old Stewart home place. This home was built in 1840, and I want to introduce you to Cliff Stewart. Good to see you again, Cliff, after all these years. You know, I used to work for you years ago and on your race cars.
Hey.
And you and Tommy, your wife Tommy. And I want to introduce you to the folks and talk to them a little bit about stock car racing as it was back in the early days, the good days of racing when it was a lot of fun.
That's when we raced for fun.
You got it.
It wasn't the high dollar stuff they've got today.
I understand. When did you start racing, Cliff?
Well, we got real serious about it in about 48. And 50 was when we had the team. We formed a team then and had Hayworth.
Frank Hayworth.
Frank Hayworth,
Yeah.
working, and Jim Pascal driving.
And Jim was your first driver, wasn't he?
That's right. Jim Pascal was my first driver, and Jim Pascal would take care of your car, and he'd put it up front too. And
well, not only did Pascal drive for you, but you had Bob Wilburn, Joe Weatherly, Ken Rush, Jimmy Perdue, and a race or two with Buddy Baker in 1961, Morgan Shepherd, and then later on you had Jeff Bodine, who won maybe his first race, wasn't it?
That's
Wheel
right.
car at Martinsville.
Yep.
And then you had Rusty Wallace.
Right.
And then you had Kirk Bryant.
Yeah.
And I believe Darrell drove a sportsman car for you, and Max Barrier.
Yeah.
I know you had a lot of drivers over the
That's
time,
right.
but you and your wife Tommy was big supporters of stock car racing.
That's right.
And as I remember, your wife Tommy loves stock car racing.
She absolutely did. She loved to go down. We owned the Tar Heel Speedway down at Randleman, and she loved to go down there at nights and drive on the track down there at nights.
I remember she won a race or two down there too.
Oh yeah, she won every race we had for women, and because most of them would, when they went in to the number one turn, going between the 1 and 2 turn, they would fall to the outside. Well, when they did, well, she just cut under them and come on out and win.
She knew all about handling, didn't she?
That's right. And you know, she wasn't running fast enough to spin it out, so you just cut it all the way down and go.
Yeah. Well, I remember everywhere I saw Cliff Stewart, I saw Tommy.
Oh yes.
With him.
Yes.
And
well,
she was a great supporter in everything that you did. Can you tell me, you say Pascal was your first driver,
yes.
and y'all raced locally? Basically, you raced right around here to start with?
Well, some, but when we originally started with Pascal, we was driving on the circuit then.
That'd be the early days of Bill France's NASCAR circuit.
That's
and some
right.
Outlaws. Bruton Smith probably.
Yeah, and that was before Bill France had organized NASCAR.
Well, I know you raced some up around Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and
Right.
New York, and Florida. You covered a lot of states back in those days, and everybody was an independent back then, wasn't it, Cliff?
That's right. He didn't have no big money in it.
And I remember sometimes you brought 2 cars to the track.
Yeah, we'd usually go to the track. We had the one we was going to run and another one in the carrier, and a lot of times we'd have to unload that one out of the carrier before the promoter would have a field of cars.
Yeah. And one guy I forgot to mention was Joe Weatherly. He drove for you the year that he won the championship.
Yep.
He run Bud Moore's car on the big tracks like Atlanta and Charlotte, but then all the half-mile dirt tracks, he drove your car.
That's right.
And I was helping you some back then too. But you had some good drivers in your time, and
Yeah.
I ain't gonna put you on the spot and ask you who was the best one, but who was your favorite?
I believe Pascal, because Pascal was one that would take it to the front, and he wouldn't tear your car all to pieces. He'd take care of your car, but he would still take it to the front. And one thing about him, he didn't go out there and just run a couple of laps and tear your tires all up. He went out and set a pace that he could run the whole race with.
Yeah.
And that was the way he won the races anyway. It was setting a pace and running it like that.
He was an early day David Pearson in a way. He was an early day David Pearson in a way.
Oh yeah, yeah, because he didn't, he wouldn't abuse the equipment. And you know, there was a lot of people out there that could win races, but they tore the equipment all to pieces. It cost you more to win the race than you was getting for it, and for the tire bill.
The first place wasn't about $1,000 back then, wasn't it?
$1,000, $1,200 for a 50-mile race. Yeah.
Well, Pascal's always special to me. You know, I worked for him off and on, and he. One thing about Jim, you knew what he's thinking. He'd tell you. He was straight up.
Yeah.
You could count on it. Whatever he told you, he was a man of his word, and one of the most respected drivers on the racetrack.
Yeah.
You remember the guy from out in Iowa came here, Hutchins, and he was going to show him how to drive on the dirt tracks, and he spun Pascal out. And Pascal never said a word to him. I'm thinking it was Asheville, Weaverville. Well, they went down to Greenville, Pickens, South Carolina, the very next race, and Pascal come up on him and got on his bumper going into turn one and was whipping it back and forth, and it was turning Hutchins like this. And Pascal turned him loose and he got to the turn, and Hutchins overcorrected and went straight through the fence. He let you know. And this trophy, tell us about this trophy.
That was winning the race. The first race that was ever televised, start to finish, was Bowman Gray, and Pascal won that one.
That was Wide World of Sports.
That's right.
Was it Jim McKay, the announcer for
That's right.
Wide World of Sports?
Sure was.
And you remember who built the engine for that car?
You?
That's right. We certainly enjoyed that race, and Tommy was there, and you got a picture of Tommy with the trophy and everything, and
yeah.
That's really neat. And I know that's sort of special, really. I mean, that's the first ever from flag to flag.
Yeah.
And it was a good race, a real good race, and Jim won it, driving your car.
Yeah.
And you know, you raced back then, and you sit back at home now. You raced up until the 80s with Rusty and Jeff Bodine.
Yeah.
You got them started.
Yeah.
And how do you see it today versus the way it was when you raced back in the 60s? You were so involved.
It's not even close to the same thing. We raced for fun. There wasn't that much money involved. Now then, it's the big dollar deal, and it pays so much for this place and so much for this place and all that. Before, it was either win that race or you went home hungry. There wasn't ever that in-between stuff. It was win or that was it. And a lot of effort was put into winning. You didn't put the effort in it to finish second or third. You know, they go to the race today and they said, well, we done good, we finished second today. Hell, you lost.
Well, I know you remember this. On the way home, we stopped somewhere and eat, and I recall eating where the Petties sometimes eat, and they'd eat hot dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, we all did. Now with Pascal, he liked pie and ice cream, apple pie and ice cream, but the money wasn't in it. Well, there was money in stock car racing, because you remember coining the phrase, you know there's a lot of money there because you put a lot in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess your business back then was furniture?
Furniture, yes. I built living room furniture, and we had salesmen all up and down the East Coast from Florida to Maine, and we shipped on our own trucks to the dealers up there hauling this. Then we had bought the other plant. We started with the one at Cedar Square. Then we bought the other plant over in Thomasville when it went bankrupt, and we started doing the main part of it up over there of our business, and we still own that and do the fabric business out of it.
And your daughter Henrietta still runs it for you, doesn't
Yeah.
she?
Yeah, Henrietta runs it.
And
she's
one time you owned a hot rod barn.
Yeah, we owned a hot rod barns, and had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I remember that little sportsman car that your son and Jay Hitchcock built. That car was ahead of its time, wasn't it?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
had some input in that car, I believe, didn't you?
yeah. He called me, and he wanted to lower the car, to lower the
Center of gravity on it.
center of gravity, and he called me about it, and he said that when he got the motor down, while the transmission, the bell housing was dragging. I said, well, you don't need to bottle that bell housing anyway, saw it off.
Cut it off.
And so he called me back a day or two later and said the transmission was dragging. I said, well, lay it on the side. I said, the gears don't know whether they're on the side or sitting up. Lay your transmission on the side and put your shifting mechanism on the top. And he said, you think it'll work like that? I said, that transmission don't know which way it is. Huh?
And later on, you let Morgan drive the car, and I think you won quite a few races with that car.
Yeah, and then Morgan got in there because we was going to slow down on racing with it, and he got in there and changed everything about it, and then he couldn't handle the car. It wouldn't stay on the track. But Morgan got through with it.
Yeah, well, I was building engines for it, and I remember a lot of what happened. But to start with, that car would run off and leave them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it would go, man.
Well, you built the motors, and it had good motors, and you had it a handling with having the motor low. And as Wendell Scott said, it was stuck in the turns.
Yeah. But you know, I best remember you when you had all those Pontiacs.
Yeah.
The 61 2 Pontiacs.
Yeah.
And do you remember and maybe tell us a story about giving Jim Paschal a car, just giving it to him? What'd he do?
Yeah. Well, they got to where we wasn't running to suit me, and it was too high a price. So I gave him the car, and he went up and run all the races up north and come back and give the car back to me.
But he won a race with it, though.
Yeah, yeah.
He sure did. He won a race with it. You always were a Pontiac fan.
Yeah.
And, of course, I know your personal car has been Rolls Royces, but you had Pontiac at heart for racing. You remember the day, maybe tell us a little bit about 1961 when the 421 cubic inch engines come out and you didn't get one, and the Charlotte race is coming up.
Yeah.
What happened on that deal?
Well, the Charlotte race was coming up, and you know, in order to run at that time, the parts had to be available where you could buy them across the counter. Well, you couldn't buy for that 421 anywhere. There was no parts available. It was still the
389, I believe.
Yeah, 285.
389.
389.
Yeah.
389, and so I told this man that was over Pontiac's racing then.
Pete Estes, I believe.
Huh?
Pete Estes, I believe.
Pete Estes, yeah. I called up there and called his house to talk to him, and his wife said he's asleep. I said, well, you tell that son of a bitch just to go ahead and sleep, and when we get down to Charlotte and I protest all of his motors down there, I'll put him back to sleep. And it didn't take but a few minutes then to get him to the telephone.
He got you a motor, didn't he?
He had Who was that built the motors for then?
Ray Nichols.
Huh?
Ray Nichols.
Ray Nichols to send us a motor ready to bolt in. Even had the fuel pump on it. It had the carburetor on it. It had everything on it, just ready to sit down in.
Well, I know when you got out of racing, you continued to follow it, and then you got back into racing, I guess through your son Howard and Jay Hedgecock. But when you went back to the Cup racing, I believe Bill Gazaway called you up and welcomed you back and said, "We missed you."
Yeah.
One thing about Cliff Stewart, folks, if he had something on his mind and something to say, he'd tell you. You had to respect him for that. And Cliff, I won't say he put him on show, but when he come to the racetrack, everybody knowed he was there. And Bill Gazaway and all the NASCAR respected and loved Cliff Stewart. Cliff, as far as I know, was always legal, wasn't known for cheating. He had good drivers, and I built engines for him, I'm proud to say. And I want to say one other thing about Cliff. I never, ever had to carry him a bill or an invoice for an engine. If I completed an engine by this afternoon, they'd come get it, and I never carried a ticket with me. In a few days, I'd hear him drive up in the lot out there outside the shop, and I hear a door shut, and he'd come in there and, "How much I owe you, Mully?" And wanting to pay me. And sometime I didn't even have a ticket made out. So he said, "Well, here, take this and apply it to it and call me, and I'll come back by in a day or two." But he was well respected by everybody and a real gentleman. Now, if he wanted to say something a little abrasive, he could, but you knew where he was coming from. And that's Cliff Stewart.
You didn't have to read it in the Webster's dictionary either.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah, some of them words I used wasn't in that dictionary.
Well, I know there's one other thing. I was up here the other day, and Cliff and I were talking about the old days of stock car racing and the people who really spent a lot of effort, went broke, lost their families and everything else to generate stock car racing's foundation and help Bill France to organize. And Cliff was there from the get-go along with a lot of others. And we started about a year ago trying to recognize these people that a lot of them you don't hear about with the NASCAR Hall of Fame or any Hall of Fame, but just think, if you will, you couldn't have built stock car racing what it is today with just 2 or 3 people. It took a lot of effort on a lot of people, and a lot of these people we're trying to recognize before they leave here. And we call this organization Our Racing Heroes. As a kid, when I grew up, I admired these people. They were my heroes. My daddy, Jim Pascal, Fonnie Flock, Red Byron, Ed Samples, and so on. And Cliff Stewart, I knew the family, and I worked for Cliff at various times, and I respected him, and he was my hero too. And Cliff, this is to honor you and Tommy, your wife, for your contribution that you made to early day stock car racing. And you can keep that and put it anywhere in the house in the frame, and always remember you and Tommy.
Yeah, we had a good time with
You
it.
did. Well, you keep that. That's yours.
Well, I was going to put it back in the envelope
Yes.
so I wouldn't bend it up.
Right. If I'd have been a real gentleman, I'd have framed it for you, wouldn't I?
This will be Henrietta's job.
Okay.
You get it framed.
Henrietta's good at taking care of the details, so we'll have to say that.
Well,
That you're a true racing pioneer, and we thank you for all that you've done for early day stock car racing, Cliff.
we done it for fun, and we you know, like you said, did I think there was money at racing? I said, hell yes, and a whole bunch of mine in it. That was Gasaway, wasn't it? I
Yep.
told that. Yeah, a whole bunch of mine in it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing some memories with us, Cliff. And I want to tell you, I appreciate it.
Well, Lord, you've got a bunch of memories too from being dad of racing and all that.
But I remember especially all you've done.
Well, we was doing it when we was having fun.
Yep.
And
it wasn't work, was it?
Huh?
It wasn't work.
No. You go there and the sweat running out of the cracky ass like a river, but you're still working.
Yeah. And you didn't dare to sit down in the chair, because if you did, you'd go to sleep. I mean, we worked 2 days and a night and never stopped.
Yeah. And when you went up north, you didn't get no sleep. You had to work on the car.
You remember when we ran Milwaukee and you and Tommy had the Rolls Royce, or the Cadillac one?
Rolls Royce.
And we come back we left that night right after the race. And y'all passed us. We was on one of those old interstates up there, and we'd run along there about 60, 65, and you come by us running probably 90, 95.
Yeah, like you was out in a place to park.
Yeah. But Darrell Bryant was with me, and Pascal had come and driven the car, and something tore up about the car, rear end transmission. And we were taking toothpicks and breaking them off and propping our eyes open so that we could continue driving. And I know people can't fathom that, but that's what we were doing just to get home, because there was another race coming up. And they never postponed a race because you're sleepy, did they?
Yeah, that sleep could go if
Well,
it made the race.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
Thanks again, Cliff, for sharing some memories. And
Well, good Lord, you helped create them, so that makes them more interesting.
well, thank you. Thank you.
An old Ford running on a red dirt road. The stars are bright and the moon is low.